before we get started, we always want to give you guys a little bit of an introduction to, AutoHook and our suite of solutions. A lot of people ask, what is AutoHook suite of solutions? Easy answer, and we say it all the time. We're not a lead provider, but we're a show provider. In reality, though, we're doing a lot more. AutoHook's driving, more website visitors and third-party leads right into our dealership showroom better than anyone else in the industry. And these visitors, they're buying cars, and we have the validated information through industry best attribution reporting. Not only do we identify the highest intensified customers from website and third-party leads, we drive 30% of them into the dealership showroom, creating a really low cost per sale. Thousands of dealers use our products every day, and AutoHook has driven in hundreds of thousands of showroom visitors for their dealers and our OEM clients as well. The AutoHook suite of solutions includes 3 separate products. Web to Show is our website lead and showroom conversion tool. Lead to Show, our post-lead product that uses actionable data and targeted filters to drive the highest intensified shoppers into your showroom. And Mobile to Show, the best-in-class mobile targeting and showrooming solution. We're really proud to partner with a number of the best names in the automotive industry, including Dealer.com, Hulk, Contact at Once, Urban Science, and CallSource, to name a few. We also service a number of the OEMs, including Chrysler, General Motors, Kia, Subaru, and others as well. And we were one of the first in the industry to adapt responsive technology. This is allowing your customers to be engaged no matter what device they're using. So I want to introduce our presenter today, David Metters. David leads the automotive team for HookLogic. The AutoHook products were actually developed during David's time as Chief Marketing Officer of a large dealer group, Mile One. Prior to that, David led the sales organization for AutoBase, one of the leading CRM companies in the industry, and he has sold, managed, and been a general manager at the dealership level. So at this time, I'm going to hand it over to David. I am going to just say quickly, guys, if you have any questions during today's webinar, please feel free to type them in. We're going to have a question and answer session at the end. David, to you.
Ani, thank you very much. I appreciate the warm introduction and the quick review of what we do for our clients and OEM customers. And today's webinar is going to be really short and sweet. But the great thing about what we're going to cover today is it's going to relate directly to how you can help attribute your sales, your current sales and your additional sales as you venture out and do different marketing, whether it's digital, traditional, really anything. How do you attribute those sales so that you know that you're making a wise investment? And so, our formal title for today is the Auto Dealer's Digital Roadmap for Awareness and Sales. But really, it's about marketing attribution for dummies. And I mean that really more for me. I remember when I first started at the executive level within the car business, I'd sold and managed and ran a dealership. And all of those, when you wear those different hats, you have different responsibilities. But when you're a CMO over a number of dealerships, like I was certainly over my head a bit in the early going. I didn't even know what the word attribution was and what it meant and how it really connected to not only what we were starting back then in the early 2000s and the digital marketing, but really back to our traditional marketing processes as well. So we're going to cover that, but we're also going to give you some great leave behinds. I'm actually going to tell you about them now, and you'll notice over in your control panel, we've got 3 different handouts. We have produced what I would say are 2 really good, if you're just getting into digital marketing, even if you're advanced digital marketing and really want to understand more about how do you attribute more to what you're currently doing, the 2 white papers I think will really help you. They get down and dirty on marketing attribution and an attribution in the automotive space, along with an infographic. And that's just really a complementary piece for some of the things that we're going to talk about later in the webinar. But know that those are there and you can download those at any time throughout the webinar. But let's go ahead and get started. Let's talk about, if you've ever been in any of my webinars, one thing that I always try to do is I try to make sure that everybody's on the same page when we use big words that we typically don't use. And, again, I remember, being in my seat as a CMO and not knowing what this was and was too embarrassed to ask, what attribution really meant. And so the formal definition of attribution is the act of giving someone credit for something or the quality or characteristic of a particular person, or an explicit or formal acknowledgement of ownership or authorship. But take those together, and what it really means is who takes credit for what. And as the visual, when you spend money in search and in traditional advertising like TV and print, even if you're doing things in social, there is all of this stuff that as it drives customers in to purchase cars, you want to be able to tie a line back, an attribution line back to how those customers were drawn into your store. And so, the important thing is to really establish this and get it right. Because as we know, there's a lot of money that's spent, and even when times are good, like right now in the auto industry, it's really good. So people are a little bit more forgiving in what they're spending. They may even pull back in their spending because they go, hey, people are going to come in anyways. That's not necessarily the case. But you should fine tune this so that when things do get a little tight, whether it's inventory constraints or just the overall economy, things are not going to always be great. We've seen this as we've been in the auto industry. It's good to sharpen your knife now and be able to know exactly where you should spend your money and why you should spend it there. So attribution in the retail segment is really super easy because, as you guys know, you can be on your computer, your laptop, as you are right now watching a webinar. You can do a quick search, which I'm hoping you're not doing right now as you're listening and watching my webinar. You could do a search on Amazon. And, in this case, you pull up Jeep Wrangler accessories and you start to see all the cool Jeep Wrangler accessories. You can pick 1, 2, or 3. Sometimes they even put them together in a package. And if I order 2 or 3 things, they may suggest the antenna at the top. But at the end of the day, if I hit click, they go into my cart, and I hit buy, they're going to show up on my doorstep tomorrow. And that's a picture that is very common at the Metter household, especially around Jeep Wrangler accessories, because we have 2 of them and we love to accessorize them and it's fun. But really, anything in retail kind of looks that way. It's very easy for Amazon to attribute the sale to exactly what I did: a search, a click, and a buy. But there's no search, click, and buy in automotive. Now, we want to talk about that there could potentially be, or that there is a push for that, or that, even manufacturers like GM are really getting involved in that and getting their dealers involved in it. But the reality, and statistics show this, that it's well under 5% of the total buyers that are in the market. And in fact, with some of the surveys that have come out lately, the millennials, who you would think that would go into that position, really have a keen sense of wanting to be in the dealership as long as that dealership experience is a good one. So I don't want to spend time on 3 to 5% of the market. I would rather spend time on the 95 to 97% of the market that we know has to physically come into the showroom in order for that to happen. But that's a big deal. And one of the many reasons, this really isn't self-serving, it's really because it's common sense, is that we've spent so much time within the AutoHook section of driving consumers into the dealership is because we know 2 things. Number one, the majority of them have to come in to purchase a car. But more importantly, the data that we're able to lock in at that time allows us to start doing those attribution lines back to where we were advertising so that we made good decisions. So if we all agree that consumer, for the most part, has to come physically into the dealership, that's got to be something that we have to be keenly aware of. So, there's a number of KPIs within the attribution chain. And I've listed out just a few of them. We could go on and on and on, but as a marketer, as somebody who sold cars and managed and been in internet departments and BDCs and oversaw all of these entities, and then being on the technology side, the reality is it comes down to about 4 or 5 very important KPIs that, again, probably 95% of the automotive internet managers, sales managers, GMs, people who are, very intentionally watching these, this is what's most important. Driving consumers from a lead into a showroom, that showroom to close rate, because that really gives me an idea of operational success or failure. The cost per lead gives me a sense of, am I spending too much to drive a consumer to fill out a form? How much am I spending to drive a consumer into a showroom? And ultimately, what's that costing me on a per car basis? All of the other ones are important, but at the end of the day, I think if you did a survey, 100% of the people would say that these are going to be the most important to them because it impacts them the most. So if we know that it impacts them the most, we're going to spend the majority of our time here. I'm not saying that those others aren't important. In fact, you're going to see that we cover a number of those in the attribution white papers that we're going to give you as a follow-up. But for time respect, plus it's my birthday today, guys, and this is the last thing I get to do today, I certainly want to make sure that I'm efficient with your time and efficient with my time as well. So we're going to attack one of the closing ratio attribution pieces, and that is the lead to show, or I'm sorry, the lead to close. Lead to close is what almost every single person in an internet department, and really overall in a sales department, looks at. They know how to figure that math out. Super easy. Have 100 leads, you get 10 to 12 people who buy, you can attribute that back to those 100 leads, and you get your closing ratio, and you're good to go. The problem is that if you're not accurately measuring your showroom visit rate, then it's really, really tough to know if you've got a lead problem or if you have a showroom problem. And so as you start to attribute these things, if you have this gaping hole in the middle, you have no real sense of if you're spending unwisely or if you're investing and you're not investing enough in your operational success. This is one of the things I learned early on in my career as I started, and this is going back to my Joe Verdi days, when I would start to map out how many consumers, this is well before internet, so, you can laugh at me, but pre-internet, I would, even before we had CRMs, I would map out how many consumers I would speak to in a day with all of that information in my up registry, and then I would match that up to sales, and I would see, what my close rate was. And I would see where they came from. Were they referrals? Were they other advertising? Sometimes I would run my own traditional advertising to drive consumers in. And it would give me a sense of where I was spending my money and if I were spending my time and money wisely. So you get it. But what's really that shows a lot of impact is when you start measuring that middle number, that showroom visit number, it starts to really open up your eyes. So in this case, you can attribute your spend as maybe not a good quality spend. Because if for every 100 leads, if you're getting 17 showroom visitors, you're closing 10 to 12 of them, you really don't have an operational problem. Your investment in training is probably well served. You have good people, hopefully consistency on the showroom floor, and consumers are, getting a good experience. And that's why they're buying at a 60%-ish clip. This probably lends to improvements on the spend, the actual advertising spend. Now, if the number was something different, then you can make, your assessment in a different way. So one of the reasons why, we've spent so much time on the showroom visit rates is because we know this. And what we also know is that the national average for showroom visitors is 17%. So for the majority of the dealers that we work with, we start to look at how to improve not just the spend, but how do we capture consumers differently to drive more in? Because if they have a good operational process like this one does, you'll start to see the same kind of numbers as far as percentage, but more sales. So let me give you the example of that. If we use the same 100 leads and we look at this and we go, gosh, our spend is probably not really good because we're only driving that many consumers. If we were to do something else, knowing that our operational success is really good at 60%, if we can figure out a way to drive more of those consumers in, and this is a little self-serving, with the dealers that we work with, we average a little over a 32% show rate, so that when we drive those same types of opportunities and leads in, more people physically show, we can attribute more and accurately attribute those 19 sales back to the 100 leads. So all of a sudden, the spend on those opportunities looks a little bit more in line. But you have to have a baseline. So before, and this is one of the things that we try to talk about with our consumers, and I know that dealer.com and others do this as well, set that baseline of expectation so that when you start to attribute specific strands of advertising down to the showroom visit level and to the sale level, you know how you've improved once you start making some tweaks. If you have that same operational process in place, you're obviously going to see the same kind of show to close. But here's the inherent flaw that really nobody talks about. Because if you want to attribute sales to lead opportunities, you got to have good data. You can't just get a first name, a last name, a phone number, and an email address and be able to match that up accurately 100% of the time against your sales data. It's impossible. People have been trying to do it forever, and typically you see a low match rate for that. The problem also happens when you start to add extra fields to this lead form. So you're kind of in a catch-22. You want a good lead, you want an opportunity, but you also want to match it up. So then you start adding address fields, other types of fields in there. But guess what happens? Your form fill rate goes way down. OEMs have done this, and it's hurt them, and they changed it. Dealerships have done it, and it's hurt them, so they change it. So you're really in a position that you have to stay true to a very simple lead form. And this is where I think that we are definitely serving our customers well, because at this point, we're fine with just getting consumer information that is, I call it the minimum threshold. Because when you match up this data, like I said in the lead form, you only get about a 30% match rate. And this isn't just from us. These are numbers that we see from our work with IHS Polk, with Urban Science, and even at the manufacturer data level. And we're very fortunate in the sense that we get sales data from all three of those groups. So in order for us to match up to our show rates and our lead rates, this is where we get our data from. What we absolutely know for sure is when you get more of that data, but if you do it at the showroom level, you have an average match rate at the 95% rate. Why is that important? Because it gives you more ability to attribute those sales back. So, when dealerships think about us and they go, well, you're just giving gift cards to dealers and you're just, incenting everyone, that we kind of laugh at that. What our dealers and our OEM partners know is that there is an absolute method to our madness. And in this case, because we wait until the consumer comes to the showroom in order to get name, address, phone number. If we ask for blood type, we get blood type. Because what does the consumer want when they're physically in the showroom? Well, they want their gift card, and they know that sometimes they have to give stuff to get stuff. And so it's very simple for us, because that 8-digit unique code that it's established with any consumer that we engage with allows us not only to grab the data that I just talked about at length, that gives us almost a 99.2% accuracy in the data that we acquire. You don't see anything like that in a CRM or a DMS system. But again, we're giving something to get something. But more importantly, that 8-digit code that you see at the top is very specific to the way and the path that that consumer came in. Why is that important? Well, we'll talk about that in a second. But I want to show you how data match and attribution really works. In this case, you'll see I'll blow up portions of this report, but this is a report that we built in conjunction with IHS Polk. So third party, allowing us to establish a good attribution chain, whether it's at the OEM level or down to our dealer level. This one shows that of the 500 customers that walked into a dealership over a 3-month period of time at this Ford dealership, 480 of them matched up to the Polk name and registration file. That doesn't mean that all 480 bought, but that means that we were able to match up data. And that goes back to my point. If you're going to attribute consumers to a sale, you better have good data in order to match up. Because if you don't, if you're only matching up 30 to 40%, you're not seeing the whole picture. But in this case, when you can match up almost at 100% match rate, then you've got a good picture. But more importantly, you can see of those 480 consumers that did match up, 85% of them actually purchased a car. And we can break it down new versus used, because all of that data is easily matched because we have all of the consumer data. To the dealer, it is very important to see the middle graph. So our dealers will get a sense, are they good at what they do? And in this case, operationally speaking, they're great at what they do. We do see some reports, and that's where the data really helps us from an operational process level, where 85% of the people buy, but only 22% of the people bought from that selling dealer, and that means that a lot of people are leaving. But when you match up a lot of great data, you can see even the consumers that left, and in this case, 22% of them, they physically walked out of the showroom. This is better than just getting an idea that your social marketing's working because you matched up 4 sales. Not only can you see the 4 sales, you can actually see the consumers that physically walked out of your dealership and what did they end up buying. Did they stay in brand? What we know is they almost always stay in brand. They just went to a competing dealership in order to purchase the car. So all of a sudden your eyes kind of are open to the fact that your spend, if you're making decisions on advertising spend in digital, so if you're spending a lot of money in SEO, or if there's an OEM program around digital advertising and retargeting, but you're not seeing this connectivity into the showroom and more importantly sales, or it's just not able to connect, you may not necessarily be spending your money unwisely. You just may have an operational process or a breakdown in the data that doesn't allow you to connect those things. And I would push you to do that, because when you have great data, you can tell a great story. So think about this in a way that will serve you well, because everyone on this call has a boss. They're responsible and responsive to someone. And so when I looked at it, when I was sitting in my seat, I was responsive to the COO and the CEO, and I had to tell them a good story. But it couldn't just be a story based on no factual data. They held me accountable. So in this case, when we're held accountable, let's say to an OEM partner or to a dealership, we have a great story to tell because it's based on factual data. In this case, you'll see Honda dealers that are on with us. We generate a lot of lead opportunities without struggling to take lead opportunities from their existing site properties or from their existing lead opportunities. We've proven that through and through. But more importantly, we can tell the story that 14,000 of these consumers have walked into a dealership, and the cost per really breaks down. You can see in this case, the cost per sale was under $60. But more importantly, we start to really tell a story of who is purchasing the car. So in the case of our Honda numbers, you can see that 6 out of every 10 of these consumers that purchased a Honda from our stores had never had a Honda in their garage previous. And so that's a much larger number than what Honda's average conquest rate normally is at 27%. But these numbers aren't exclusive to Honda. You could say, oh, great, Honda dealers. Again, if you have great attributable numbers, you can tell a great story. So don't think about this in the sense that I'm giving you my numbers on Ford dealers. Think about how you can take your numbers once you start putting your data together and going to your boss to tell a lot of stories. Why we should do more, how we should do it, or I should be doing this. I could be responsible for more, because we all like to move up. This gives you the opportunity to tell that better story based on factual data that will allow you to put yourself in a position of strength. But as you see, Ford numbers are similar. General Motors are similar. I could keep going on and on. Subaru numbers are actually a little bit better than similar. But in every case, I'm able to tell a very succinct story of lead gen, showroom rate, sales generation, and what those costs per for our dealerships, and more importantly, down to a lead, a showroom visit, and a sale number. Now, I won't tell you what a good cost per sale is. You have to establish that, whatever works for you, because in some markets and in some brands, $150 cost per sale is excellent. In some, it's $450. But what I can tell you is what is a good cost per show number. A good cost per show number is anything south of $70 cost per showroom visitor. And how you assess a cost per show is any amount of money that you put into driving that consumer into the showroom. So in our case, if we're working with, let's say, a LotLinx, and we're driving a consumer from a third-party site down to the dealership website, ultimately lead form, showroom visit, and sale, which I'll show you how we do that in a second, it gives you the sense of whatever those costs were associated, and you dump that into that showroom visit, and it'll give you a good cost per show. So most people know us as this. We'll incentivize a consumer on a lead form overlay within a dealer website, and we drive lots of great opportunities off of dealer websites that don't cannibalize your current lead situation, and that's why we're great partners with dealer.com. But more importantly, it drives those consumers in the showroom, and it allows us to attribute it right back to that placement. But what you may not know about us and what we do at the OEM level down to the dealer level are some of the things I'll show you. We can do this in display advertising or even in a retargeted message. So we might not want to incentivize a consumer out of the gate, but if they've gone onto our site and then left, we can retarget them with a very specific informational type of an incentive. In this case, why would you do that? Well, when they click on for info and they go back to the site, we can prioritize that placement. When they fill out the form, they physically show up in your dealership and they buy a car, we can attribute that right back to a retargeted ad, where almost nobody in the industry has that attribution chain down to a showroom level and a high sales match rate as we do in our space. But we can also do that, like I mentioned with LotLinx. Consumer can be on that third-party site. You want to drive traffic to your VDP pages. Consumer lands on your site. Even if you are not, even if you're on our program and the overlay is on your site currently, or you're participating in an OEM campaign program, which a number of you probably have at some point, especially if you're a Chrysler dealer, Subaru dealer, Kia dealer, VW dealer, all of those. It doesn't matter. We can prioritize when that consumer clicks through that it will be attributable back to that LotLinx click, so that when that showroom visit happens and that sale happens, we can measure that back to that opportunity. You'll even see this on third-party sites where we'll power things that will allow that consumer to come into your showroom and ultimately purchase, and we can point that back, whether it's for a dealer, for an OEM, for a partner, doesn't matter, give you that ability to have that chain, that attribution back. And this is a busy slide, but this is something that you'll start to see with OEMs, where they're acquiring conquest opportunity lists, and instead of just driving them with traditional direct mail and email, we'll actually be able to drive all the way down to a dealership showroom and be able to measure that back to that conquest piece. We've done that with OEM programs over the past year, and we've had great success. We can even do it with email and mail. So, when you do mail, it's really tough sometimes. Sometimes it can be easier because you have the actual consumer data, but you never really know how many of those people physically hit the showroom. Now, some can argue, well, they bring their pieces in, or we keep an up count, we do a good job in CRM. I agree, I do. That's the exception to the rule, though. So you want to have a more established piece. If you're a great digital marketer or a marketing executive or somebody who aspires to be a great marketing executive, having this strand, these different attributable pieces in all of your marketing gives you the opportunity to really be able to tell that great story I talked about earlier. We do it with emails, clicking through, same way as kind of that LotLinx example, giving the customer the ability to be incentivized, give them something when they physically show up because they buy at such a high rate. We're in a good position from a cost per show standpoint, but more importantly, you have your reporting. So something that we show to a number of our dealers and to our partners is this thought. This is really kind of the attribution strand. So no matter what you're doing, you have the ability to tie in some opportunity to establish your showroom visit rate, and more importantly, have all of that great data to be able to go back and match it up with sales data. So great filler information for you will be the two pieces that we have as handouts, and we'll also follow up with links so that you can download these as PDFs if you don't get a chance to grab them out of the handout area during the webinar. But they're great pieces. Keep them to yourself, share them if you choose to, but really they were put together to be great informational asset pieces for everyone that we serve and honestly don't serve within the automotive industry. The more we talk about the ability to attribute sales back to the different pieces of advertising, the better all of us will be. Vendors will be happier because, well, most vendors will be happy because it'll give you the opportunity to see great ROI. Dealerships will be super happy because they'll feel better about their spend. There won't be guesswork as much. There'll be actual data-filled decisioning happening at the dealership level. And OEMs will certainly be happy because you're selling product and you're doing it in a way that they will probably like. And they get to see the sales attribution as well. So with that, I would like to go ahead and open the floor to any questions. Hopefully this has been a good, short, succinct, informationally packed piece, and more importantly, hopefully you'll get a good follow-up version of this, not just with the webinar, but with the assets that we've shared with you today.
Okay, thanks, David. We do have some questions coming in. The first one came in asking, I need some help with evaluating how my current marketing channels are performing. Do you have suggestions for companies or technologies that could help out?
Yeah, so that's a broad question. I'll do my best. The best thing to do, if you don't have a reporting tool, so if you're using multiple providers, let's say you're using one for search, one for display, a website provider here, maybe you even have two website providers, which sometimes happens because you have a mandatory site from the OEM and you may have your own site, or maybe you're part of a dealer group. That always complicates things. What I would recommend, this is something that I tried to build back in my days at the executive operational level and just couldn't get it done. I tried to hire people to do it, and it was just, I think it was before its time, but we're starting to see some really, good mashup reporting tools out in the market. So, one that I would recommend would be like ROI Bot. Gives you the ability to pull all of that data together, start to really get a sense of, what things look like. I would start there before I would do anything, before I'd spend any more money, only because it gives you an opportunity to pull all your reporting together. Dealer.com has a great dashboard. So if you do everything within the Dealer.com family and DealerTrack, which they're starting to merge together, and then I can't talk about what they're going to be doing in the future, but if you have tools like that, that helps you. Another one I know is String Automotive. String has a great analytics tool. So look and see what is the best fit for you to pull all of your stuff together so that you have better vision. It's like getting a pair of glasses. And then once you have the vision, you start looking to see where your holes are. Do you have the ability to measure showroom visit rate? Do you have the ability, to measure how you're spending your money in digital advertising and hooking up with Google Analytics? As long as those connections are good, then that gives you a better sense. So hopefully I answered your question, or at least gave you something to start with.
Thanks, David. Another question coming in based off of the auto case studies you showed on your screen a little earlier. Someone's asking if you can provide some more color on why the conquest rates in the AutoHook studies are so much better than the OEM averages.
Yeah, it's funny because we spent a lot of time on that because initially we were thrown by it. And what was interesting is it overall the study was done by Polk, so it wasn't done by us. And as we dug through the data, we went through everything, we really kind of went back to our core. The reason why there are more consumers that bought that didn't currently have is because we drove more consumers into the dealership than normally would have been there in the first place. So if you think about it, we did this program, and I won't mention the OEM, but it was a model of car that is not a very good selling car at all. But we did this campaign, it was a couple of years ago. And during that campaign, we were able to drive a high rated number of consumers into the dealerships, and a number of them bought. It almost doubled the amount of cars that they normally sell within that model name. And so why did that happen? It was because we more than doubled the amount of consumers that physically walked into the dealership. So there are people, as you know, who will look and investigate a car. But if we change the game on them a little bit, if you spend any time around me, I always talk about changing the game. If you play the game the same way all the time, then you're probably going to get the same outcome. But if you change the game, there's a good chance you're going to have a different outcome. And when you offer something to somebody who wasn't necessarily looking for that, and all of a sudden you drive them into the showroom and you put them in the seat of a car. If any of you guys sell cars, you know you have great power when you're face to face with a consumer. Like I've sold Eagle Premiers to people. And if you know anything about those cars, they were like the worst cars ever made, probably ever made. But I got people to buy them, not because I was a jerk. It was because there were actually, some people who like those cars. If I got them into the seat of the car and I got them excited about the car, they bought the car. And that's what we found in the case of that model that didn't perform well, that overperformed when we drove more consumers in. So my answer to the question, ultimately on Conquest, is we drive more consumers past a lead into the showroom, and more importantly, the salespeople do a good job in getting them excited about it, even if it's a Pontiac Aztek, and they buy the car.
Thanks, David.
Yep.
Another question coming in, going back to the attribution side about the show to close ratio. Someone's asking, couldn't the 17 shows out of the 100 leads that we used in our example be the result of an operational failure rather than a spend issue? For example, if the internet sales manager or BDC agents don't call the leads or follow proper processes to contact the customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me clarify. When I say operational issue, I mean a dealership showroom operational issue. So if we go back to that to that slide. Let me go to slide. Here we go. If you look at these numbers, if you get 17 people who physically come in, and let's say 12 of them purchase a vehicle, you're doing a really, really good job. That's a good batting average. If it were to be 5 out of the 17, that's not a good batting average. That means you're letting a lot of people out the door who aren't buying cars. And a good show to close rate of showroom visitors to close is 60%. 50% is still good, but anything under 50% is not good at all. And these are historical numbers that can span over a 15-year period of time. So could a dealership have done better than getting just 17 leads into the showroom? Absolutely. And I'm glad that question came up. But what we find is that, and this is over a 4-year period of time, of dealerships looking at what their baseline is before working with us, and the best showroom visit rate that I've ever seen is 23%. And it was legitimate. They did a great job of driving a consumer in. Their BDC processes were awesome. I know who trained them. He's a gem. He does a great job. And so those dealerships might have an 18 or 19% closing ratio because they're driving 23% of the consumers in. But anybody who tells you, like, you can't have a 20% closing ratio if you only drove 18% of your consumers in. And so we've never run into a dealership that's getting 30, 35, 40% of those consumers that are physically coming in out of the 100 leads. So hopefully I clarified and expanded on the question.
One of our Kia dealerships is on. They're actually a part of a web to show campaign being run by Kia, and they're curious that if they come on with AutoHook as a direct customer, will the campaigns conflict?
Yeah, great question, because we run into this quite often because we support over 1,000 dealers on our products, but then we have thousands and thousands of dealers that have been with us in either a campaign that's currently running right now or campaigns that have been run in the past at the OEM or regional OEM level. The easy answer is absolutely no. And the great thing about the way that our technology works, very similar to the attribution piece that I showed you with LotLinx and some of the other pieces, is when a consumer comes onto your site and Kia, in this case, is running a campaign specific to one piece of inventory, let's say the Optima. The overlay that shows on the Optima inventory is prioritized and is paid for at all the way down to the showroom visit level by, in this case, Kia, the OEM. However, when the Kia dealer uses our program, they won't get charged. They'll actually get those consumers coming in for free because the OEM is paying for it as part of the campaign. So we'll run a program, let's say with Subaru. In a marketplace, we may have 40 Subaru dealers that are using our monthly program. The campaign gets turned on. Whatever is driven from that campaign is paid for by the OEM. The dealer only pays for any other of the showroom visits that come from any other inventory. So it works in perfect harmony together, and we built that specifically for the dealer's benefit.
Thanks, David. Another question came in. What's the next best thing that I need to pay attention for as it relates to attribution?
I think that if you have your lead information dialed in, your showroom visit rate dialed in, and your sales rate dialed in, the thing that I start to look for is inventory. So what inventory do I have Do I have a lot of inventory? Do I have a little inventory? And so as I start to look at that, I start making changes. I start pulling levers on my advertising spend according to those needs and wants. And so, you guys know how sometimes OEM programs work. They'll turn on a stair step or they'll raise money on the hood of a car in order to move metal. You've got to start thinking the same way. So start looking at your inventory and start pulling levers specific to a lot of inventory that you need to move fast, or a little inventory or specialized inventory that's just not moving. And all of a sudden, you'll start focusing on those right things because you have all of your other pieces in order that allow you to really give you a good ROI on those moves specific to inventory. Once I do inventory, then I start looking at employees. And you go, well, wait a minute. As a digital marketer, what do employees have to do with it? Well, salespeople. Back in 2008 and 2009, when times were really, really super tough, I felt it was really my responsibility to drive enough traffic into those stores of quality to keep those guys eating. Like, they had rent to pay, houses to pay for, cars to pay for, families to feed. That was important. And so once you get the inventory piece kind of dialed in, look at your employees and look at your scheduling of employees. All of a sudden, you can start making moves because you have all of these different attribution pieces in place. You know what works and what doesn't work. You can even start doing things based on days and times so that you can start having flexible schedules, so you can start giving benefits back to your employees. Nothing that you would ever think of part of your job responsibility can ultimately be there once you have all of these other foundational pieces built.
Great, thanks, David. All right, guys, we don't have any other questions coming in. So, we really want to thank you for joining us today. You'll get a follow-up email with, the information, the link to the ebook that we discussed. But if you do have any other questions, feel free to contact us or give us a call directly. Otherwise, David, if you'd like to say goodbye.
I would like to say goodbye, and hopefully everybody enjoyed themselves, and I hope that you have a good rest of your day today.